Feeling thirsty for knowledge? Hackers on the Rocks is the podcast that mixes refreshing conversation with potent cybersecurity insights. Serving up these insights with a twist, we pair a different software vulnerability with a refreshing cocktail recipe each episode. Hello, world, and greetings all around. This is going to be a really fun episode. We had a wonderful episode maybe a few months back where our guest Adam detailed threat modeling. Our guest today is going to really dial that conversation up several notches. So, Bob Lord, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. You recently released a new project called Stop Hacklore. Tell us, please, what on earth is Hacklore and why do we want to stop it?
Yeah, so a little bit of background. So for a number of years, I've noticed that the cybersecurity advice that people give, really aimed at everyday people, has been outdated, in some cases just pretty wrong. And some of this advice was true in the past, and we can go into some of the details there. But the technology landscape has improved enough that we really need to go back and recalculate what it is that we tell people about how to stay clear of the most common attacks and the most common ways that people lose control of their accounts and their devices. So a few weeks ago, I received more background. On a regular basis, my CISO friends send me little bits of what I now call Hacklore, which is information about hacking and folklore. And they do it just to get a rise out of me. And one Sunday, another CISO sent me, basically was a trifecta of QR codes and USB juice jacking and don't use public Wi-Fi. And I just decided to turn my eye rolling into a project. So I set up a website and asked a few friends if they wanted to co-sign, and they all said yes, which this just never happens. And especially with people who work in these big companies, they all have to go through like corporate communications, but they said, yes, this is a no-brainer. I'm just going to go do this. So it was really marvelous to see people recognizing that this was a problem, that the technology had gotten better over the last 10, 15 years, and that we needed to understand that our advice had drifted a little bit away from the actual way the technology works, but more importantly, the way the attacks work.
Yeah, I really like in this like age of propaganda and like viral posts and deep fakes that what you've done is basically just posted a letter to a website and had a bunch of co-signers. Like, I feel like that's like the right solution to this problem.
Well, you hit on something important, which is there hadn't been a place where people could go to get the truth. You could go find 1,000 places that said, don't use cafe Wi-Fi because the evil barista is going to steal your credit card numbers. There's 1,000 places that will tell you that. But there wasn't one place that you could go to that would say, this is not correct anymore. And to try to substitute that with information that's, it's the boring basics. The basics are still the basics, and the bad guys still work to do what is easy. And boy, oh boy, they're successful with just doing the basics. They ask you for your name and password, and you give them your name and password. And it's like no MFA, password reuse, and then boom, terrible things happen. And we just felt like we just needed to set the record straight. So it's just one place you can go to find both ends of that equation.
And I think we'll certainly talk about, to your point, evil baristas and juice jacking and what are those things and where's the myth coming in from. But I don't know about you. I'm feeling pretty thirsty. Do you feel like a drink is in order?
I could do that.
What would you like to drink today?
So I would like to have I'd like to have a Bourbon Old Fashioned.
All right. What, first of all, I'm excited that this is like the first multi-ingredient cocktail we've had in a while. I think people have gotten really simplistic. So thank you for not being such a simplistic guest when we're particularly talking about Hacklore and oversimplifying and overcomplicating all things. What is an old fashioned?
So an old fashioned, so it actually is a simple drink. And so that's part of the appeal. So when you said, what do you want to do? I wanted to do something that was just kind of the basics. So it's really just some bourbon and some bitters and some sugar.
All right.
And if you want to throw in a little twist, you can throw in a twist. Like, it's just not that complicated.
Fair
The other reason I was thinking about this is the lore that I have read about is that back in the 1880s or whatever, like people were adding different kinds of liquors to their drinks. And I don't know if it was modern people would call that mixology, but it was getting a little fancy. And so people would go to the bartenders and they'd say, listen, I just want something old fashioned. And so that's just what they would get. Now, what I love about this for this show is I'm not entirely sure that's true. I mean, it's so compelling.
Are you spreading myths? Is that what's happening?
So, like, this is the thing about folklore. This is the thing about myths is it could very well be true.
It
And
sounds
I've
good.
read that several places, so maybe it's true, but like it's an open question in my mind, having studied this with the world of cybersecurity. So anyway, we can get
No,
going.
you're good. I think, look, if we're talking about the simple drink and the, the common ingredients and back to basics, I mean, this is the cyber hygiene drink that I've been like craving all night long. So, all right, I have all those things that you mentioned. I've got my twist in a glass. I've got
Okay.
bitters. I've got bourbon. Is there a particular recipe you want to follow, or is it just like we
Um,
just smash it in
well,
there?
I'll show you what I'm doing, and then of course you can you do what you need to do. So what I've got is just a glass, and I've got a simple just a sugar cube in it. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a couple of bitters. Just do that, and then maybe just a little splash of water, and then we're going to muddle this around a little bit. Hopefully that works. Oh, works great. Works great. Supposed to swirl it around a little bit. So I guess it is complicated because you have to bring the model, but really, really, you probably don't.
No, I'm actually I'm going to cheat a little bit and just use a really heavy ice cube, and it'll work the same way.
Awesome. Awesome. And so now I'm going to add the ice. And my wife was nice enough to go out and get me some clear ice. So I don't know if you can see that, but that is clear.
No, it's clear. I can't see a thing. It's perfect.
Clear, 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 clear. And now we're going to add the bourbon. So it's really pretty straightforward. A little bit of mixing here.
As we're mixing, I definitely appreciate the fact that you have like everything in like finely, presents real nice. I don't know if for the audio folks that are listening, Bob has like perfectly measured out things in really good containers and they're all the right instruments. Nothing right out of the bottle. It's beautiful.
The one thing I'll mention that I found was that this is a cheese cutter, and this is really good for peeling the orange.
Oh, I just use a little curved blade. That is genius.
You can do that too, but this
Yeah.
one turns out for me to work very well. I saw that tip somewhere on the interwebs, and that one is not a myth. It actually works pretty well.
Well, there you are. Drink in hand. I feel like we're about to do like cyber two truths and a lie or like cyber never have I ever or something. But yeah, cheers, Bob. It's nice to catch up with you over an old fashioned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Delicious.
All right. So while we're imbibing in deliciousness, what are some solid examples of Hacklore? I know you mentioned some earlier, the QR codes and juice jacking. Is that there's got to be more than just those two items? Is that fair to say?
So there are a few that we mentioned, and there were a few other candidates that we thought were not quite ready. That there was still enough ambiguity in those that we didn't add those, and we can talk about those if you want. But for me, the number one thing is the public Wi-Fi. So the evil barista is going to get you, and you'll see almost exactly this verbiage in a lot of different text. You'll see something that says, "Don't do any financial transactions or do any shopping because all of your traffic is visible to hackers and they can steal your credit card numbers." And they'll say this literally. It's not like they're hinting. They'll say they'll steal your credit card numbers and they'll be able to break into all your accounts. This was kind of sort of true in 2010. And I don't know if you remember this thing called FireSheep. Do you remember that?
I do, but share with our audience what that might be, please.
So this was a little triggering. So if you want to take over, that's fine. So I was at Twitter at the time. And back then, most sites other than banks would encrypt only your login, so the name and passwords, when it was being sent to the server. So that was sent over HTTPS. And then what would happen is the server would fall back to HTTP for a variety of reasons, performance mostly. But so what this meant was almost all of your traffic was actually unencrypted. Like 99% of it was just unencrypted. And so FireSheep was a plugin to Firefox, and some security researcher released this, and it would actually allow you to go to a cafe or some other place where there was public Wi-Fi and eavesdrop in on their connections. And so it would show you what other people were doing on Facebook and Twitter. And it also had a button so that you could take over their accounts, and it could do that because it would be able to see all of the session tokens, all of those cookies that were being sent back and forth. And so that really started a movement to encrypt everything. And a lot of companies, including Twitter and Facebook and others, had initiatives that were kind of edging towards that. But this was the catalyst that really moved those projects forward. So yeah, there was a germ of truth back in the day, but things have improved thanks to a lot of work by the browser manufacturers, operating system companies.
Yeah.
Let's Encrypt. We got to give a big shout out to Let's Encrypt for free digital certificates. I mean, they just took the one excuse that people kept using over and over again off the table. It's like, oh, the $35 a year, that's too much for you? How about free? Okay. And so that really started to work. And so we have to give huge props to just the whole ecosystem for moving things forward. And so fast forward today, like I tap my own network because that's the kind of weird guy I am. And so I split the network and I send a copy of every packet to a security onion. I don't know if your audience knows what Security Onion is, but it's a fantastic tool.
Can you give like a 30-second? Anytime we talk about
Yeah.
jargon, I always ask the guest to explain what it means.
Yeah, absolutely. So Security Onion is an open source collection of tools that allows you to, like I said, there's a technique for splitting your traffic so that every time a packet shows up on the network, a copy will be sent to this other little PC that I have, and it runs Linux, and it runs this thing called Security Onion. And Security Onion will then take all of these packets and it will store them, but it will also create some metadata. So it will actually analyze what this packet is, what it's for, who it's coming from, where it's going to. And then I can sift through this in a very easy way. Like I'm not a SOC analyst. I used to do some stuff like that, but that is not what I do today. So Security Onion gives me the ability to say, hey, from my iPhone, from my Chromebook, like show me all the traffic and show me what percentage is HTTP versus HTTPS versus other protocols, DNS. And it is astonishing to me how little of the traffic that I use is over HTTP. And basically, it's so close to zero that I can actually name the websites I've visited that work. Because I have to click through the warnings and everything.
Yeah,
so
browser won't let you do it by default. No, I love that.
Yeah. So that was really that was the first one. That was the
Yeah.
first bit of Hacklore.
So that one makes sense to me. Like you said, I think, there was a time when the advice was given, and that seems to be like anachronistic these days. Um, I'm curious because you mentioned it in the top, juice jacking. I'll ask you in a moment just to kind of define what that is. But like, as far as I could tell, there has not been a single public instance of juice jacking unless you have like a really well constructed, contrived environment where everyone is like opting in to see all the things. And like, I'm curious, like, knowing that there's not been an attack in that style, why does that one spread so quickly? I feel like I've seen billboards saying don't juice jack, and the airport, like I feel like
Yeah.
DHS is telling me constantly like not to use any of the airport jacks that are like every 5 feet, like
They're everywhere,
which
yeah.
seems kind of bizarre to me. But like, why does this one spread so easily?
So I think all of the Hacklore spreads for a few different reasons. One is that we form our beliefs through a variety of things. Like people actually saw that back in the day, you could look at traffic and most of it was unencrypted. So people form their beliefs that way. People also form their beliefs through listening to experts, through listening to people with influence. People, of course, are bombarded with ads that talk about different kinds of things. Public Wi-Fi and the VPNs, those are the big ones. And because there's this huge echo chamber and everybody's repeating everything else, it's hard not to believe these things. And the other thing I'll mention is until this little side project that kind of blew up in really surprising ways, there wasn't a place where you could go listen to people who were like running some of these companies who knew how the attacks worked. There wasn't a place where they would go talk about this. And so the conversation was dominated by all of these other interests, some commercial interests, and some of them just people repeating stuff because it's must be true. Everyone else is saying it. And you didn't have the people who actually knew how the attacks work coming out in force and talking about it. And a variety of reasons why CISOs aren't going to go around explaining what percentage of their customers get compromised, and I was one of these. Like I look back and I was like, was I part of the problem? Yeah, maybe. I guess I had other things going on, but this allowed all of them to collectively come together. And so those are, I think, based on my understanding, that's why Hacklore or just folklore in general has come to be. So the one about juice jacking is this theoretical kind of attack where The attacker recognizes that a USB connection can be used for both signal and data and power. And that's what makes it such a great thing. You just plug it in once and you can do all sorts of great stuff. And so this observation led some security researchers to do a demonstration at DEF CON. And you're going to have to check me on this one. I think it was 2011, something like that. And so they did a demonstration. And as best as I can figure out, the phone companies took that to heart and started to make some changes that would make that less and less likely over time. And, I'm never going to say software is safe. I also led the Secure by Design program at CISA. So I'm the guy who says oh, software could be so much safer. For the love of God, please make your software safe, everybody. I'm not going to say that software is safe or that it's not possible to imagine a scenario where juice jacking might exist, but we need to start separating the probability that it would happen, from the possibility. The fact that it's theoretically possible, and maybe if somebody didn't read the thing, they might click through and they might do the other thing. Sure, that's possible, but is that how the attacks actually happen in the wild? Is that how people lose control of their accounts? Is that how they lose control of their devices? And the evidence just isn't there to support that. So that's why that one showed up on the list as well. And to your point, and I've asked many people this, I have not yet found a single instance of juice jacking in the wild. I will send you for the show notes a little article I wrote where I tried to chase down the one claim of juice jacking that seemed like it was real. I was like, oh, finally, okay, fine, something that we can work with. So I'll send you that. I chased it down, and it was nothing.
I mean, I've definitely seen some stuff in my time too, and I think even just last summer at DEF CON, I was hanging out in a room, and some people definitely had a malicious cable. I mean, again, to your point, USB, that little plug has a lot of smaller wires, and some of those wires are transmitting electricity, to charge the battery, and some are those wires are for data. And I do think there's plenty of examples of USB devices being malicious or misrepresenting what they actually are.
Totally.
But to your point, Bob, to operationally pull off some of the demos that I saw, everybody needs to opt in and downgrade, and know what's happening and click the thing on multiple screens. And it was interesting, but to your point, I think just operationally, it doesn't make sense, because the devices that are probably more prone to this are going to be Windows XP and iPhones that are older than my children. There are easier ways to compromise them than to custom manufacture and then conceal an exploit into a very thin looking cable, or hide it behind some drywall. So
yeah, exactly.
I'm with you.
All of these, we're going to find at some point an exception. We're going to find a vulnerability in all of these. The question is, when somebody finds that on such and such a version of such and such a phone, you actually can juice jack somebody, when somebody really goes and they figure it out, the question is, what do we do? Do we tell 1 billion people to change their behavior and not use the tools as they were intended? Or do we go to the manufacturers and say, hey, could you please fix this? This is not right. And so again, this ties back into the whole Secure by Design thing. What do we do when we find that these products are deficient? And we have this knee-jerk reaction of pushing the burden of staying cyber safe onto the individual, onto small businesses, and onto big enterprises who can afford it, although reluctantly. Or do we go back to the manufacturers and say, you've got this vulnerability, fix it? And by the way, for the ones who have the same classes of defect showing up over and over and over again, could you please do some root cause analysis and go figure out why, yet again, it's a directory traversal vulnerability? Why? I'm sure somebody in your organization is actually bothered by it as well. And if you could go tap into that person's genius and let them do their thing, maybe you just get rid of the whole class of defect.
As your social network continues to send you Hacklore, how do you decide which myths to tackle versus, hey, that's just not going to be appropriate for this thing? Because you're right, there's multiple competing interests, and you've got the pressure on the vendors, but the pressure on the technical users and the enterprise specialists, and then the advice to the common person that neither has knowledge or interest in the technology that they really use every day.
So I'll tell you a couple of examples. One that we thought of, and then we decided to take it out. One of them was webcam covers. And, I've got a webcam cover on this Logitech device. It just kind of came with it. And we thought, for a variety of reasons, that there were enough examples of hardware that did not properly take full charge of like an LED or something like that. And so it really was possible for a piece of software to disable things. And it was also the case that somebody mentioned for the most recent phones, it's not obvious to somebody what a yellow dot means or a green dot or like whatever. And so we thought, we don't want to have to get into, we don't have to, we don't want to have to create a whole nother page that just describes all of the complexities of this. Like if you're on an Android phone, you should look for this, but if you're on an iPhone, you should look for this. But if it's older than this much, you should look. And so we just decided that would have diluted it. And so we just decided to leave that out. But I don't know, maybe people can write in and tell me like, no, we should put it back in. And, or maybe there's already a resource that talks about how to think about that more coherently. The other one that we didn't put in, which we thought of a little bit, but somebody wrote in a very persuasive comment, which was around the idea that malicious advertising can be a real challenge. And so to put in an ad blocker. And so a whole bunch of us thought about this for a while, and we're not going to put it in just yet. Although I run an ad blocker and tell people that it's a pretty good idea for a few reasons. I mean, mainly there are some very specific use cases where it's absolutely a really, really, really good idea. But on the whole, that's not the way most attacks work. And we're really trying to stay at that fringe of the low effort things that you can do that are really how most attacks work. And so how do most attacks work? Again, they ask you for your password and you give them the password. And you have a weak password. So once they get one, they can just start blasting all over the place. You don't have MFA. That's really how so many of them work. So different threat models come into play. And so, maybe there's room for somebody to yes and. Maybe there's room for somebody to come in and say like, okay, do everything at hacklore.org, but we're going to add a few more things. And I think that there's plenty of room for that.
Hacklore Junior, Hacklore Senior. It's funny because one of the things that did cross my mind as I read the list was, the recommendation was, or the myth essentially was like, don't bother clearing your cookies. And it's not that that's wrong. It's your point now is like, it's incomplete, that if you really are concerned about the privacy implications of cookies, you also need to worry about like HTML5 storage and session data and cached items and stuff that like the average human being, like most people don't even know what a cookie is, let alone like what a JavaScript blocker is. And so it is Hacklore, and it's also like common man advice. So it's an interesting project you have.
And cookies are frustrating, right? Because you're like, go delete the cookies. Well, surely that'll stop people from tracking me. And oh my goodness, do they have ways of tracking you? And you listed a few of them, but there's so many. And it's a very frustrating thing because people are like, tell us more about privacy. And like, well, again, we're going to try to stay in our lane. Privacy is outside the scope of this. And it's hard. It is really, really hard. So, hats off to anybody who can coach all of us through that, but it wasn't going to be us.
No, I agree. I mean, we recently did an episode with Yael Grauer, and she was talking extensively about, networks, shaping traffic to collect data and then just to sell it to brokers. And it's funny because I think her position might be, and I'm not trying to put words in her mouth, but like where you started the show of like, well, like Wi-Fi is totally safe. And I'll bundle this in with another item that we haven't talked about yet, but like, and a VPN is maybe extraneous and not super helpful. Maybe for the scope of like not being compromised, not having like a device or account breach. But in terms of like privacy and tracking, those might be the counterpoint as to why people do not use public Wi-Fi and or add a VPN somewhere. And it's really hard to balance security of person and account and device. And, those are sometimes, to your point, like they can be at odds.
Yeah. And privacy is such a complicated thing. The ad tech system, all the data brokers. I mean, it is a phenomenally complicated ecosystem, and a lot of simplistic advice simply will not do what people think it is going to do. And so they're engaging in this cargo cult behavior that is not going to get them where they want to be. And in some cases, there's not going to be a way to get them to where they want to be. You can't unring that bell. You can't go, you can go tell all the data brokers to delete your data, and there are services that will help you with that. But even then, it just keeps coming back. And so it's, I'm sure you're going to have other like privacy people on. It's really, really hard. So again, we want to stay in our lane, and just to double down on the thing I said earlier, we're never going to say anything is safe. It's not safe. Like it's just not like we're using computer.
You're here first, ladies and gentlemen. Don't use the internet.
And so like, you're joking, but like the threat model, it matters.
It does matter.
And so
It does.
So, there are people who are high value targets and they need additional information that's going to be really tailored to their individual circumstances. Human rights activists, reporters working on national security matters, election people, corporate executives, people facing intimate partner abuse. There are so many different threat models that are outside of what we're doing. They need special treatment. And for some of them at the higher ends, maybe not using a lot of technology is the right solution because we just don't have other tools other than turning these things off and not using them. Don't let them track you. So those are outside. We do have a resources page. So we do link to some of those other sources. And of course, we do link to Consumer Reports Security Planner, which Yale manages. For those other things, we do want to give people an on-ramp, but we're not going to be talking about that.
Yeah, fair. I think our community is very strongly opinionated and loud and boisterous, which is kind of maybe surprising for a group of, self-described introverts. But I'm sure since you've launched Hacklore, like I've seen it pop up in many locations. I've seen you pop up in many locations giving interviews and whatnot. So I'm sure the feedback you've gotten has been like both like supportive and critical. Has anything been like particularly memorable or perhaps anything that you've received that's like maybe shaping the project's future direction?
The biggest surprise was how little real pushback I got. And I don't know if that's just because people are biting their tongues or, it's the holidays or whatever, but I'm hopeful that in large measure, people are understanding that we need to. So, okay, I'm very old. So I remember there was a day with spreadsheets. You had to hit like Shift F9 to recalc because it was too expensive every time you added numbers into a spreadsheet for it to like go through all of your formulas. And so you'd have to hit a button. I think we need to hit Shift F9 and do the recalc. And a lot of people were willing to kind of scratch their heads and say, really? Actually, yeah, that's okay. Yeah. A few people are still wedded to some of these old belief structures. And a few of them have really gone to great lengths to try to continue to rationalize their belief systems. And I think a lot of it just comes down to the threat modeling. And when we give advice to everyday people, it needs to be something that is going to reduce their risk. And one of the things that I learned, so I was the chief security officer at the Democratic National Committee after the 2016 hacks. And so I spent a lot of time trying to figure out, okay, I don't own the whole democratic ecosystem. It's this, the DNC had 200 people, but there were parties in all 50 states and there were people all over. How was I going to secure them when they didn't work for me and they didn't work for my company, which is hard enough when they do work for your company, trying to force everybody to do the same thing. That's nearly impossible. But when you were just an email address or a person they saw in a newsletter, how are you going to convince them to change their behavior? So I started to build this DNC security checklist, and I thought it was pretty well written, and I gave it to a bunch of people because I like to treat instructions like software. And my God, did I realize how little I understood about what real people think about their accounts. And, the first thing I'd do is sit down and say, like, I'm just going to sit here and I want you to go through this checklist. And they'd start saying things like, I don't understand. You said I'm supposed to use MFA. Yep, that's right. They're like, I'm on the screen here on such and such website and it says 2-factor. What's up with that? Like, oh. Then I go to another site. It's like, oh, this says 2-step. Like, oh, yeah, boy, we don't make it easy for you, do we? And so like I hit these, I would have considered them minor speed bumps, but they were like brick walls for most people. And so we had to go back and just constantly tune it so that average normal people who were not technologists, who were not listening to this podcast, so they would have a chance of being able to go through and do the things that mattered most. And one of the things I learned is no matter what people tell you, they'll tell you they'll do anything to stay cyber safe. But when push comes to shove, people are very busy. They've got their lives to lead. Will not spend an hour a month doing things that make them cyber safe. You will, like, the real hard truth is people will spend minutes per year. And so what are you going to tell them? Are you going to tell them to avoid the cafe Wi-Fi? Are you going to tell them to turn on MFA on their mail account? And it really comes down to just the basics.
Yeah, it's funny. I almost feel like some of that pushback might in fact be additional myths for the future, but it's always like, well, I've got antivirus, so I'm good, or I'm using Linux or Mac, so I'm good, or, I'm not a large company, I'm too small to be interesting, so I'm good. And it's like, hold on a second there. Let's walk through these one at a time. And now we have yet another list.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so one of the things that I thought of, and maybe you have some ideas on this, I haven't quite figured it out. A lot of everyday people, because of the conversation that they hear, think they need to go to great lengths in order to stop spy novel sort of attacks against them. I have also worked with true high value targets who, how do I say this without like outing anybody, but they're clearly high value targets. You would say, I'd say the person's name. You'd say like, yeah, I see that person on the news. That's a high value target. And it is not the default for those people to think that the bad guys are coming for them. And so on the one hand, the spy story belief system is embodied with a lot of everyday people, but the reverse is true with some high value targets. Not all, I don't want to make any sweeping generalizations here, but I've seen very specific instances of that. So the question is, how do you do the Vulcan mind meld and sort of swap them so that the everyday people do the basics and then build on that? And then the people who are high value targets realize, no, I really do need to turn MFA on my primary email account.
I think you mentioned this earlier, and it kind of stuck with me. I've been trying to figure out how to turn it into a question, so kind of bear with me. But I think one of the things that I really like about this project, as you mentioned, is yes, it's you, but it's people that are feeding you, hey, what do you think? And then the actual project as it went forwards, as version 1, it was co-signed by several CISOs and other prominent members of the community. And when I think about those members that signed, and you as well, right? Like there's almost like a dual hat nature, right? Like on the one hand, you are like the company's internal authoritative resource. Like if somebody needs like cyber news or cyber strategy, they're going to go to you or one of those people on that list. And like, that's their person. But for the most part, especially in 2025, right? Like CISOs are also customers. And so they receive the pitches from all of the cyber companies. And so from that lens, I really appreciate the intent of this project to like just calm everybody down. And maybe it's a little bit tongue in cheek, but like, sales and marketing in cyber, to grab attention, we often glom onto the one-off scenario that's never going to happen and all the fear mongering. And like, we're still debating right now, like, is AI going to take all of our jobs or is it just going to pollute the planet and kill us all? And like, there's no middle ground. And I wonder if there's, well, I know there is, but like, maybe you can maybe elaborate on like, to what extent like having co-signers come in and say like, everybody relax, and have the high prominent individuals on that list, to what degree that should trickle back to the vendors and be like, hey, like it's 2025. We can't be fear mongering. We're not all like one click away from dying.
Yeah. So you bring up a really good point, which is that we're all human. The CISOs are all human. Not every CISO wanted to sign up for this. Some names are not on the list. And some of that is just because, my God, it'll take me 6 weeks to get through my comms department or whatever. But, I think we should just assume that this is not solely about juice jacking, that this is about our collective need to find reasons for what we're doing. And sometimes we have to hit reset. And this is very expensive, especially if you're like literally everybody in the world of security, you're so overloaded. And there's so many days when you feel like I will never win, I will never get ahead, that the landscape is changing too fast and the product requirements are just coming at me fast and loose. And I can't win. So it's hard to say, hey, everybody, we need to hit that shift F9 and recalc. But I do think that this tapped into, see, I told you I was old.
This is good. We're not double clicking in anything. We're shift F9ing, and that's so much better. We're good.
I think it was shift F9. You have to look it up, something like that. But I think what we need to do is just recognize that landscapes change, the threat landscape changes, but the technology landscape changes as well. And we just need to carve out a little bit of time to say, is this still true? Or in some cases, was this ever true? And if you don't have data, if you don't have information that informs your beliefs, then your beliefs are going to be formed by other forces. And if this industry, one of the things I say on a regular basis is the world of cybersecurity is unburdened by facts and statistics to guide us. And so we make up our own minds. But maybe this is a call for more data for us to try to tap into resources that do exist, and to make sure that we're making those better decisions. And so maybe it'll trickle down to the vendors if enough buyers actually can be consistent about what they're asking for. If we can have more of a conversations, I don't have a website that tells everybody what to go to. There is the whole secure by demand idea, which is like if like if every corporate buyer asked for something that wasn't military grade encryption, if they actually asked for things that really would move the needle, then the whole thing would just work itself out. And do something else other than secure by design. But I think you're absolutely right that this is an opportunity for us to say, is there another place where we can apply the same sort of deeper thinking? And I think the answer, what I've been hearing from folks I know, is absolutely.
Appreciate it. I feel like unless you have anything else, that's a really good place to stop.
I think that's probably good
Yeah.
enough to whet people's
We
appetites and maybe send them on over to the hacklore.org website.
Yeah, so on that note, our last bit is we call it last call. So, Bob, anything you want to add about your work, websites you want to plug, anything you mentioned or didn't mention today?
So hacklore.org is really the main thing. I'd also mention that I have a Medium blog, so I don't post a lot, but some people feel obsessive about posting every Thursday afternoon at noon or whatever. I don't really do that. So when I have an idea, I'll post it, so it's not going to flood your inboxes. So I'll send you the link to that, and you can put that in the show notes.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you so much for your time, Bob. I really appreciated
Been
this.
my pleasure, and thank you for the inspiration to break out all of the tools for the old fashioned.
Liquid and otherwise. Cheers.
Cheers.